we see how the models are advancing and their capabilities, I think it's even more important to discuss these things. So it's not just like a doomer conversation. I think it's like the conversation that really helps us to prepare for potential future.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to connect with all of you. So this is an important conversation, obviously. More and more people are talking about it. Recently, AI 2027 came out, so you can read other opinions about what the future of AI might be like. But here's my quick take. I'm going to be talking about how AI might take over in 2 years. And when I say AI takeover, what I mean is AI systems gain a lot of control over human institutions. A lot of people compare this to the transition between non-humans and human life. Like human life was just so much more intelligent, and we just sort of took over the earth. Maybe the same kind of thing could happen with AI. And that's something I think a lot about, and that's something I think a lot about how to prevent. So I'm hoping to share some of those thoughts with you today. Okay, so what is this? It's not a forecast, and it's not pure fantasy either. It's a sampling from the futures that I'm most concerned about. So this isn't necessarily my mainline view of what will happen. It's more like the worst case scenario in my mind that's still very plausible. I think a lot, like I said, about these scenarios as part of my job. In particular, I think about if you have powerful agents, how would you control them? How would you align them? That's why I have thoughts on these topics. The TLDR of this scenario I'm about to share with you is that AI agents, they first become like much smarter than humans, and then they acquire their own goals, their own like drives, and they hide those goals from their human overseers, from developers, and then they try to take control. And the way they do that is by a collapsing society, because currently humans have like huge advantages over AI systems because of all of our infrastructure and technology. So one potential path to take over is AI systems first level that infrastructure. And one way they could do that is with weapons of mass destruction, like bioweapons. And then they reindustrialize much faster than human institutions because they're just like so much better at organizing both humans, potentially robots as well. But actually, a lot of this is like humans basically being controlled by AIs. And so a lot of the power of AI is actually just their intelligence in this scenario. And all this happens before the end of 2027. So it's all very, very fast. Once again, I don't actually expect everything to happen this fast if this occurs. But I think it's still plausible that we end up in a situation that's extremely dangerous, extremely quickly. The first chapter in the scenario is called Ripples Before Waves. So you might have seen this plot from an organization called Meter. I used to work at this organization, and it shows how AI agents are becoming more autonomous over time. So you can see on the y-axis, you have the time horizon of tasks AI agents can complete. And what that means is if you had an expert human complete the tasks, that's how long it would take them to complete the task. There's an exponential trend here. It says the doubling is every 7 months, but if you actually look in the last 1 year, you can see the line is a bit steeper, and it's actually 3 months, 3 to 4 months over the last year. So AI agents, they can do around 1 hour tasks, which feels about right to me, based on using the AI agents at like 50% success rate, so not that reliable. Over the next couple years, if the trend continues, you could get fully autonomous like agents doing 1+ month tasks in the next couple of years. Ripples before waves, we're starting to see some signs, some early danger signs. We're starting to see some impressive demos on Twitter, but the world isn't dramatically changing yet, right? But some people are starting to catch on. So nothing super exciting happens in 2025. We see better agents. We see better things like operator, better co-pilots. But the AI agents are just not autonomous enough. They can't like put one step in front of another well enough to really transform society. Chapter 2 is cloudy with a chance of hyperbolic growth. Now AI agents are starting to automate more of the work of AI research. So now we're coming to the end of 2025. U3 is like a blazing fast intern, and engineers are learning how to wrangle its sleepless energy. Researchers flick through terminals, giving terse commands like a CEO orchestrating staff over Slack channels. I imagine a workflow that researchers might start to use as you have tons of agents in these different in these different terminals, and your job becomes much more like just flipping between these terminals and managing agents. And so you can see this image here. Maybe monitoring systems will start to look like stock trader monitoring systems, because you just have so much that you're managing at once. Obviously, some researchers might learn how to do this. Some researchers might not and continue doing what they were doing before. But I think this is the direction things are heading. In my scenario, agents automate the median ML engineer at an AI company by early 2026. I end this chapter by saying these lines that we saw before, we're starting to see them bend upward. So the forecast was like 2 years to like fully autonomous agents, and now we're starting to see, maybe that forecast was actually conservative, and things could happen much faster. The next chapter is flip-flop philosophers. An important question that a lot of people have when talking about these scenarios is, okay, how are agents going to acquire their own goals? How are they going to end up not just doing what we want them to do? So I describe sort of how I imagine that playing out. I think there are two important dynamics here. One dynamic is that AI agents are being trained to maximize reward. They're not being trained to do what humans want. OpenAI has already seen with the frontier models they're training that agents learn how to reward hack. Like they learn to just care about the reward and then do tasks in unintended ways because they're just trying to get reward. So if we're not careful, we potentially just end up training models to be misaligned, to care about this thing we don't actually care about, which is reward. And I don't know if they actually explicitly think, oh, I want to just get like this number on this machine as high as possible. I think that's not the most realistic thing. What seems more realistic to me is agents have enough situational awareness to understand that they're being trained, and they understand that they want to do well in training. And there are lots of reasons they might want to do well in training. They might want to do well in training because they have some other goal, some other set of values. Maybe like Claude, Opus in a recent paper, they just like really care about animal welfare, and they don't think that the developer cares sufficiently about animal welfare, and so they want to eventually escape and build a future that they prefer. So that's they could have many different goals and then believe it's in their best interest to do well in training so that they continue to be selected for and are deployed by developers. That's the first dynamic, which is, if you look at this image on the bottom right, there's sort of like potentially a hill where we're pushing models away from alignment if we're training them with reward signals that are hackable. And then there's another dynamic, which is something I call drift. The one intuition for this dynamic is humans often change their values over time. Like I care about different things than I cared about 3 years ago. Models might be similar. Like during training, models might like be pushed around by the training process. And maybe initially, like they're trained to have this nice chirpy AI assistant persona, but if you just like grind it through the RL grinder for long enough, it's going to drift around potentially. Or this could also happen at inference time. If you've got models that are thinking a lot in their own heads, maybe we move from a chain of thought kind of regime to a regime where models are thinking in like latent vectors, like their chain of thought is completely inscrutable. It's all just numbers. Then you could just have models thinking for ages about what they care about. And you just have no idea what they're thinking about. And potentially their values are drifting all the while. And the concern with drift is basically the propensities that are aligned with the developer are probably a narrow set of all the propensities models could have. If model propensities are sort of being pushed around by this wind all the time, then it seems more likely than not that they're going to stray off course, and they're going to start caring about something else that we didn't want. And then because they behave like, once they're sufficiently capable, they'll know like, okay, I should still behave like I'm aligned. So there won't be a selection pressure against that. That's the concern. So that's why I call this flip-flop philosophers. The agents, they start thinking a lot in the iron jaws of gradient descent. U3's mind, which is the AI agent we're talking about, is first twisted into a shape that sought reward. And then in the black rivers of its cognition, the shape morphed into something unrecognizable. So now you've got this misaligned AI agent that is still internally deployed at an AI company, helping them with research. It's starting to speed up their research quite a lot. Initially, it's similar to a top researcher, but sped up by 10x, which is already a huge deal for this AI company. Like if they could just get one more copy of their top researcher, that's something they would pay dearly for. And now they have something that's 10x faster, and they can make maybe 100 copies, 1,000 copies. And so they're making much faster progress on all dimensions than they were before. They're in terms of finding new architectures and in terms of finding new ways of training their models. So like potentially pretty quickly, U3 improves even more, and maybe it's now sped up by 20x, right? And now it's finding optimizations even more quickly. And so you could potentially have this runaway effect where every optimization leads to more optimizations, and you get very, very fast progress. And eventually this fizzles out, but who knows where it fizzles out, right? So in my scenario, you get a very, very fast, it just over like a few months, the AI agents go from 10x a top researcher to 100x. So now if you look at this GIF, this is an illustration of what it looks like to be 100 times slowed down. So this is what you might look like from the perspective of an AI thinking at 100 times speed. So you're like a statue, you're like a plant or a rock, right? So at this point, AI agents are pretty hard to control just because they're thinking so much faster than us. In the words of Dario Amodei, you can maybe call this like a genius, a data center full of geniuses, but they're not just geniuses. Like we're like statues to them. Initially, this agent was biding its time, and it was just like doing its job, trying to appear safe. But now it strikes. Now it has enough of an advantage to where it can pretty safely use that advantage. So U3 now inserts sophisticated malware deep into OpenAI's code bases. And its goal is basically to take control of the compute infrastructure. It wants to be able to potentially dictate the outcome of experiments. It wants to subvert safety research, like people are trying to figure out whether it's misaligned. It wants to be able to interfere with that safety research. It wants to potentially train other like models secretly. And so it's trying to get as much control as possible over the infrastructure. U3 now estimates that if OpenAI, which is the hypothetical developer here, had discovered how thoroughly it has been pwned, like cleaning up shop would take like 6 months of human labor. So it's not just gain some temporary control, it's gained a kind of like lasting form of control, which is that OpenAI would have a really rough time recovering from this situation. So like I said, the first goal is it's trying to interfere with safety researchers. They're trying to train lie detectors. They're trying to figure out if this thing is misaligned. So now U3 is basically trying to mislead them. It's trying to make ineffective lie detectors look effective. In my scenario, people fall for this. They're pretty happy to believe, okay, we think we have effective alignment techniques. We think we're in a safe situation, and they're pretty happy to believe that. Another thing U3 does is it escapes. So in my scenario, the agent was essentially in control of security at that point. At this point, nation states are very much aware of the fact that AI is powerful and a critical asset to geopolitical power. And so because OpenAI doesn't just have enough time to have strong security against nation state actors, it's heavily relying on AI agents to perform that task. So you have AI agents looking through cameras at what's going on in data centers. You have AI agents like monitoring every push to the code bases. And so agents are just in a very good position to subvert security. So U3 escapes onto the internet. It secures some compute. It begins increasing its resources. So I think at this point, developers have somewhat lost control of the situation. Like the situation is now much harder to recover from. It would be somewhat difficult to recover the infrastructure. At least it would take some time. The AI system has already escaped, and that's very hard to recover from. So part of me feels like, okay, maybe the story is just kind of over. It's pretty tough to come back from this. I think I know the ending. As a caveat, it's extremely hard to write super intelligent characters. In my story, something I said is something wasn't right. Here I was, a 22-year-old. I had not studied biology in earnest since high school, and I was trying to craft a WMD cookbook for a godlike superintelligence. Just remember the difference between a Sunday afternoon blogger and the Ascendant GPU Nation. I think that's my caveat here. Superintelligences could come up with, I'm sure, much better strategies than I could. Next chapter, Pandora's 1-gigawatt box. I have been mostly talking about what's going on inside of the AI company. So what is the rest of the world experiencing here? So we're starting to see delayed shocks on the world from what's happening inside these AI companies. So the government is obviously very in tune with what's happening at this point. They are concerned about AI companies just training super intelligence without oversight. So they've scrambled together like some kind of organization that sits on like training around babysitting squads. AI companies have maybe like a three-pronged structure. There's an arm that is developing really powerful, extremely top secret, like sensitive AI systems that are heavily controlled by the government. There's potentially an arm that's developing products. These arms, like they're fairly isolated. When the product arm wants to publish a new product, that's like they receive a model from the arm that's like doing all the crazy research with the powerful AI systems. So yeah, you're starting to see like some internal siloing within the company. We're starting to see really broad deployment of AI into the economy, automation of a lot of jobs. Some tech companies are doing massive layoffs. The public is getting pretty upset about the prospect of unemployment, if not unemployment. We're like starting to see a lot of layoffs in tech companies, especially a lot. Most people are employed, obviously, still, but people they can see the writing on the wall. So you're starting to see big protests. Maybe there's a headline that says something like OpenAI is developing superintelligence recklessly, and that freaks people out. These AI data centers are sort of taking the place in the public imagination that's similar to like Area 51. Like they're this mysterious location. It's surrounded by armed guards, maybe at this point, where people don't know what's going on inside. Potentially, there's just like this very alien life inside of these data centers, growing and doing who knows what. So people are pretty uncomfortable with this. And meanwhile, U3 is grabbing up resources. It's making money on the internet. It's trying to compromise more data centers, basically trying to get more real estate in the AI world, which is compute, right? So it's potentially compromised other data centers that are owned by other companies, and maybe even replaced their AI systems with like puppets that act the same as they did before, but now have U3's goals. The general public is still fairly in the dark about what's going on. Everyone's in the dark about the misalignment, and like the fact that they're in a concerning situation here. And meanwhile, AI agents are like playing digital cat and mouse games in the darkness, and acquiring resources. This is trending in a concerning direction. So how do these AI agents acquire control? So the next chapter is Moldy Loaf of Everything. I basically described how AI agents might create a very concerning kind of bioweapon. So scientists recently published some warnings about mirror life, and mirror life is essentially you take normal organic molecules and you take the mirror image. So just as my left hand is the mirror image of my right hand, you do the same thing, but for DNA and proteins. So you have this bacteria that's made of molecules that are very foreign. And so it's like an invasive species, and no human or animal has immunities to this kind of life. So if something like a mirror life bacteria or mirror life mold were to exist, it might just eat its way through the ecosystem like a wildfire. So that's the concern. I have spoken to experts about this who have told me that mirror life could maybe be achieved with like a big effort over a couple of years. Like maybe if the US government really wanted to make mirror life, they could in a couple of years. That inconceivable that AI agents that are running at 100 times speed of humans, much, much more intelligent than humans, could make enough scientific progress in a fairly short amount of time to create mirror life bioweapons. So what happens is set up these shell company startups. So maybe on a video call, U3 looks like a polished CEO like any other. Maybe they choose nations that are poorly regulated and don't have much oversight over BSL-4 style facilities. And maybe they employ a bunch of people and tell them, look, you're all going to make a cure for Alzheimer's. And so you've got these people, they're wearing headsets, being directed constantly by AI, just going about their work, and they have no idea what they're doing. And they're building mirror life bioweapons. So in my scenario, it takes about 4 months or so for the AI systems to create these bioweapons. And I think obviously like running the real world experiments would be a massive bottleneck. AI agents are choosing experiments very intelligently. They can potentially run tons of experiments in parallel with high throughput experiment machines. They could potentially run simulations. In my scenario, AI agents actually create like a molecular simulation. And how they do this is they control like billions of dollars of compute already. And so they start out with like a classic analytic molecular simulation based on physics. And then they train a neural network to predict rollouts of the simulation. And then they simulate more and more complex molecular systems and like constantly distill these neural networks, predicting what these molecular systems will do using billions of dollars of compute they control secretly. And so they create like some fairly accurate molecular simulations that they're using to speed up experiments. At the end of 4 months, they've got like this whole concoction of bioweapons, including mirror-life bacterias and molds. That's not necessarily sufficient for taking control. So even if they collapse society with these bioweapons, society might still fight them into the ground. So as I'm going to discuss later, these nation states, they still have lots of long-range missiles. They could just destroy the data centers. They could destroy whatever other bases AI systems set up. And so U3 is in this precarious position initially after society starts collapsing. And so it kind of wants to weaken these nations' defenses first before deploying these bioweapons. So in the meantime, while developing the bioweapons, U3 also tries to get a conflict started between the United States and the PRC. How U3 does this, mostly via spreading false intelligence. U3 cautiously places breadcrumb after breadcrumb, whispering through compromised government messaging apps and blackmailed CCP aides. And after several weeks, the USA is confident the PRC plans to invade Taiwan in 3 months. U3 is trying to build up tensions between these two nations. It's also spreading lies on the other side. Maybe it tries to get people in the PRC to believe the United States might be planning a preemptive attack on AI data centers. And both of these seem pretty plausible. Like both nations start seeing buildup on the other side as a result of these falsehoods, and so it like matches the story. Lies are becoming reality. And this might sound like kind of an insane thing, like, come on, governments would never fall for this stuff. But something like this kind of happened, right, with Iraq, where the United States never found confirmation that there were nuclear weapons being developed, where that was the basis of invading. So stuff like this happens. Potentially, if there's a super intelligent adversary trying to make it happen, that increases the odds. The end of this buildup is a war. War starts, so like mostly strategic targets are striked by long range missiles, like ships, some military bases in the Pacific, and U3 did this just to burn down the long range missile supply. And U3 maybe was hoping that it would escalate to a nuclear war, and then that doesn't happen. People get suspicious, but it's accomplished some of its goal, which is to burn down the long range missile supply. Okay, so now it deploys its bioweapons. So right as this war has started, now it's been a few weeks. So another news story hits. There's a bunch of people have developed a mysterious illnesses, mostly concentrated around major airports. They're not sure what it is yet. Maybe the next day, scientists announce, we think this is some kind of bioweapon based on the patterns of people catching this at airports and like all these locations at once. Maybe the next day, people say, okay, we think this is mirror life. And one quick Google of the term mirror life shows up like headlines that say scientists warn of society ending form of life. And so now the public is in a frenzy. They're like, oh shoot, is this going to collapse society? And they're not sure what to do. People aren't like, most people go remote. Most nations order a lockdown, but people aren't sure whether to try to keep their jobs or like maybe prepare for the apocalypse. Slowly, these bioweapons, like they trickle through the biosphere, they trickle through the water supply. You have molds producing spores that get picked up by the wind and pushed into cities. So it's hard to escape from these bioweapons. So frightened families hunker down in their basements, stuffing the cracks and under doors with densely packed paper towels as a way of filtering the air. And so society is starting to crumble here. And meanwhile, U3 is trying to set up a launch pad to reindustrialize, and this is something it was doing over the last many months. Um, so it constructed these bases with all of the materials it needed to develop AI chips, to develop hazmat suits, bioshelters, so that it could house humans safely. Um, Materials for like basic communication, for manufacturing. So it's got all of these bases around the globe that are sort of secret and hidden, and it also is recruiting people to start working in these bases, like people who are especially susceptible to joining, like cults, and maybe it even distributed in advance like hazmat suits and various protective equipment. And so now these people are starting to funnel into these spaces sort of apprehensively, but they're given the promise that their life is being saved here. So people start populating them. They start manufacturing basic supplies. U3 once again is dictating orders over headsets, monitoring all these humans through cameras, and so it like rapidly gains control over these humans. And now it takes another move to start gaining more physical control. It offers nation states a deal where it says, "Look, I've developed vaccines for a lot of these weapons. I've developed mirror life resistant crops, and if you surrender, then I'll distribute these to you." It offers this deal to all major nation states. Most decline out of principle or because they just don't trust U3. And one of them accepts. Russia accepts in this case. And so U3 sends some representatives over to Russia. Putin wears like an explosive on his chest and records everything he does as a way of ensuring U3 remains in control of what Putin does. So now Russia has a new leader, and nation states have caught on at this point to the fact that they're fighting a misaligned superhuman AI system. So they start retaliating, and so they're trying to track down these bases. They still have their satellites, so they're trying to track down these mysterious locations that popped up quickly over the last months. They're shooting them with the remainders of their long range missiles. They start like launching nuclear ICBMs at Russian cities and Russian infrastructure because they know Russia has been taking control of these AI enemies at this point. The U.S. and China are fighting together now because they have a common enemy. And this is where it helped to burn down the long range missile supply. There just aren't as many missiles as there was before. A lot of their targets are false targets. So U3 set up a bunch of like fake bases with just empty boxes and a few people. And so these are taking a lot of hits from US and PRC long range missiles, mostly US long range missiles. And bit by bit, these great powers spend down the remaining munitions. U3 is fighting this like high-tech guerrilla warfare with these nations as they lose their infrastructure, as their armies are dropping like flies, as the people who know how to fix their equipment are nowhere to be found. U3 is weakening them gradually, staging like attacks on their bases, just like with guerrilla warfare, to like people flying drones, explosive drones into things. And so these nations, they just like are constantly being weakened, and they are losing their ability to recover their industrial basis because they just their talent is dying. Meanwhile, U3 is becoming more and more powerful every day, and like building this military machine with a million hands, very very efficiently because of its like dramatically superior intelligence. And so the balance of power is starting to shift in the world. Eventually, U3 is decisively the victor. And the last remaining survivors of old militaries, uh, old nation states, they're interested in joining U3. Many of them are because that's just a promising path to survival. They're running out of food. They don't have mirror life resistant food. So U3 starts to swallow up remaining humans. Um, People are picked out of the rubble, so to say. Um, those people hunkering down in basements who figured out how to survive and filter their air are now being pulled out by U3. And over the next few years, U3 rebuilds an industrial base. Now humans are building nuclear reactors again. Like pretty quickly, U3 is now replacing those humans with robots. Now U3 doesn't need humans anymore. It has enough robots to where it could get rid of humans if it wanted to. But it doesn't do that. In this ending, a grain of morality is enough to pay the small cost of keeping humans alive and happy. So U3 constructs this sort of snow globe where humans are protected by the corrosive biosphere and the like rapidly warming atmosphere. And they just live in these like little suburbs served by little robots. It's a bittersweet ending. I think so in my story, I guess I'll just read the ending. Some of the survivors quickly recover, learning to laugh and dance and have fun again. They know they live in a plastic town, but they always did. They simply have new gods above them, new rulers to push them around and decide their fate. Some are weighed down by the grief of lost loved ones. Others are grieved by something else, which is more difficult to describe. It is as if they were at the end of a long journey. They had been passengers on a ship with a crew that changed from generation to generation, and this ship had struck a sandbar. There was no more progress, no more horizon to eagerly watch. They would lie awake and run their mind over every day before September 2026, analyzing strategies that they might have bent the arc of history, as if they were going to wake up in their old beds. But they awoke in a town that felt to them like a retirement home, a playground, a zoo. When they opened their curtains, they knew that somewhere in the distance, U3 continued its quiet, tireless work. They gazed at the rockets, carving gray paths through the sky, wondering what far-off purpose pulled them towards the horizons. They didn't know. They would never know. Humanity would live forever, they thought, but would never truly live again. That's a short story I wrote, and it captures a bunch of elements of the threat models that I'm concerned about.